There are nights when the air feels older than time itself, when silence carries something almost sentient, something watching from beyond memory. In those moments, one begins to wonder if our history was ever ours at all. The textbooks, the timelines, the linear comfort of evolution, they form a story so neat, so perfectly told, that it feels rehearsed. But beneath that surface, buried in layers of forgotten earth and whispered across the ruins of vanished worlds, lies another narrative. A version of humanity that doesn't begin in Africa, or with fire, or with the wheel, but with something stranger, something unrecorded, something ancient beyond measure. Some fragments remain. Inexplicable stonework carved with impossible precision, genetic anomalies that refuse to fit within Darwin's quiet logic, myths that repeat across continents long before contact was possible. They speak of beings who descended, of knowledge given, of resets and rebirths in cycles of light and ash. And while modern science writes them off as coincidence or metaphor, there are those who suspect these echoes belong to a truth far older than civilization itself. A truth that survived extinction and silence, waiting to be remembered. This is not a story of belief, but of patterns, of how the same question keeps resurfacing in every forgotten temple, every forbidden text, every unexplainable artifact. Where did we truly come from? Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The first doubt always begins with a fracture. Something small, almost invisible, that quietly splits the surface of what we thought we knew. It might be a stone too heavy to lift, shaped with an accuracy we still can't replicate. Or a map, drawn centuries before the continents were even charted. It might be the strange familiarity of myths that mirror each other from opposite ends of the earth. Somewhere in those fractures, the illusion of linear history begins to crumble. Long before the modern mind placed humanity neatly upon an evolutionary ladder, ancient cultures whispered of a time when the sky and the earth were one, when gods walked among mortals, and when knowledge was not discovered, but remembered. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, the beings who descended from the heavens. In Mesoamerica, the Quetzalcoatl taught humanity the arts of time and creation. In Egypt, Thoth inscribed the measure of the universe into stone. They were not described as spirits, nor as abstractions, but as real presences, tall, radiant, and infinitely wise. And yet, every trace of them dissolves into myth, as if memory itself conspired to erase their footprints. The oldest stories, the ones carved into clay and stone, never claimed that humanity began from nothing. They spoke, instead of intervention, of a shaping, a mingling, a sudden awakening that altered the course of the species. Archaeologists uncovered tablets in Nineveh describing a divine assembly, debating how to fashion humankind from the blood of the gods and the clay of the earth. It reads like allegory. But then, fragments of genetic data found in early human remains tell a stranger tale. Sudden leaps in cognitive ability, inexplicable mutations, and a timeline that skips forward too quickly. Science calls it the Great Leap Forward, a burst of symbolic thinking and culture that arrived almost overnight, without an evolutionary bridge to explain it. What if that leap was not random? What if it was guided? In 2015, researchers studying mitochondrial DNA found peculiar markers in modern humans that diverged from the expected ancestral patterns. The data suggested an interbreeding event with an unknown species, one not represented in any fossil record. The headlines dismissed it as noise, a genetic ghost. But in the undercurrent of quiet conferences and late-night emails, some scholars whispered that it could be the fingerprint of something non-terrestrial, not alien in the science fiction sense, but alien to the current understanding of Earth's evolutionary timeline. Every civilization carries its own version of the same memory: a fall, a flood, a forgotten golden age. Plato wrote of Atlantis not as fantasy, but as history recorded from Egyptian priests who themselves claimed it came from those before the first dawn. The Mahabharata speaks of cities that glowed like suns and weapons that burned the sky. In Bolivia, at Pumapunku, stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons lie scattered as though by an explosion, cut with a precision we cannot replicate even with laser-guided tools. In Turkey, the temples of Göbekli Tepe, older than writing, appear already complete, as if the builders inherited architecture rather than invented it. It is said the past leaves no witnesses. But what if the witnesses are still here, hidden in plain sight? There are human skulls found in strata older than they should be, artifacts embedded in coal seams millions of years deep, maps showing the Antarctic coastline free of ice, drawn long before any known expedition could have seen it. The Piri Reis map, compiled in 1513, is perhaps the most haunting of them all. Its lines trace Antarctica's true shape beneath the ice, an outline only modern radar could confirm. When geologists examined it, they estimated the ice-free coast had not been visible for at least 6,000 years. That means the original source of the map predates recorded civilization. How could that be? Who saw it, and from where? For centuries, every anomaly was tucked away under the word anecdote. Science, after all, demands reproducibility, and these remnants, scattered across millennia, refuse to fit that demand. Yet, taken together, they suggest something extraordinary: that human civilization may not be the first, but the latest in a long cycle of rise and erasure. A memory that reawakens in myth, encoded in our oldest languages and passed through the symbols carved upon stone. Ancient Sanskrit texts speak of manvantaras, epochs between destructions, where knowledge is lost and the earth is reborn. The Hopi speak of worlds that end in fire and flood, only for a remnant to emerge and begin again. Even the Bible carries this resonance. There were giants in the earth in those days. Were these metaphors for spiritual awakening, or veiled accounts of something literal, an earlier species, greater in stature, wiped away by forces unknown? Modern science dismisses catastrophism as a relic of superstition, yet the geological record speaks otherwise. Layers of iridium-rich clay mark global cataclysms, sudden extinctions, and inexplicable resets. Around 12,800 years ago, a thin layer of carbonized sediment appears across North America and Europe, evidence of a continent-wide inferno. At the same time, temperatures plummeted, megafauna vanished, and human culture regressed. This event, known as the Younger Dryas, remains one of history's unsolved mysteries. A fragment of a comet, some say. But the ancient legends remember it differently. The wrath of the gods, the cleansing of a corrupted world. The thread between these stories is not coincidence, it's continuity. The same symbols recur across continents. Serpents coiled around trees of life, suns devoured by shadow, divine teachers emerging from the sea. They form a network of memory that transcends geography and language, like fragments of a forgotten code. And when decoded, they all whisper the same message: humanity was not alone in its beginning. In 1976, linguist Giorgio de Santillana published Hamlet's Mill, a study suggesting that ancient myths were not moral tales, but astronomical records encoding precession cycles, evidence of sophisticated sky-watching predating known civilizations. He proposed that a prehistoric culture, aware of cosmic patterns, encoded their knowledge in stories to survive the next destruction. If that culture existed, its survivors would have been the gods remembered by the early peoples of Sumer, Egypt, and Mesoamerica. Not deities, but the last custodians of a world before ours. But where did they go? Ruins like Nan Madol in Micronesia rise directly from the sea, built from massive basalt columns that seem to defy engineering logic. Legends claim the city was built by two brothers who flew stones through the air. In the Andes, the Tiwanaku complex aligns precisely with astronomical solstices, though the precession suggests it may have been built nearly 17,000 years ago, long before humans were supposed to possess such knowledge. And deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, satellite imaging in the 21st century revealed geometric formations buried under kilometers of frozen time. The discovery remains unverified, yet the rumor persists that something vast and ancient sleeps there, waiting for the ice to melt again. Still, for every question, the modern narrative tightens. We are told that civilization began 6,000 years ago, that writing and agriculture mark our true ascent. Yet bones, artifacts, and myths keep contradicting that story. Each time one door closes, another opens a little wider, as though history itself were trying to be remembered. Perhaps the most haunting evidence is not physical at all, but genetic. Hidden within our DNA are non-coding sequences, so-called junk DNA, whose origin remains unknown. Some researchers speculate it may contain dormant instructions, evolutionary scaffolding from something before us. Could it be that we carry within us the memory of our makers? That what we call myth is, in truth, biological memory, encoded across aeons, reawakening as intuition, déjà vu, or dream. If the human story began not from chance, but from design, then who or what was the designer? The answer, if there is one, lies in the silence between civilizations, in the ruins submerged beneath the seas, and in the shadows of our own genome. It is a silence that grows louder the more we listen. The pyramids, the monoliths, the maps, the myths, they do not ask to be believed. They simply exist, out of place and out of time, like fingerprints of an intelligence unwilling to be forgotten. And perhaps that is the most unsettling thought of all, that we are not evolving toward something new, but remembering something ancient. That progress is only return in disguise. When the night deepens and the world goes quiet, it almost feels as though the earth itself is whispering, trying to remind us of a story we once knew by heart. The story of where we truly came from, and of what came before. But to hear it, one must listen not to history, but to the pauses between its lines. There are places where time feels wrong, where the air holds a density that memory alone cannot explain. Standing among the weathered stones of forgotten sanctuaries, one senses a language that predates words, something carved not merely into rock, but into the structure of the earth itself. Those who have walked through the halls of Karnak or the terraces of Machu Picchu speak of the same sensation. an awareness that these monuments were not built as acts of faith, but as vessels of memory. They were constructed to endure when all else was lost, to preserve what history could not afford to remember. Modern archaeology speaks in cautious tones. It measures, it categorizes, it hesitates to wonder. Yet beneath that restraint lies a quiet recognition. Some of these structures should not exist. The precision of the Great Pyramid aligned within a fraction of a degree to true north. The polygonal walls of Sacsayhuaman, whose stones lock together like melted clay, resisting even the passage of blades. The subaquatic ruins off Yonaguni, Japan. Massive steps descending into the deep, too geometric, too deliberate. Each discovery forces a pause, a momentary fracture in the comfort of our timeline. The oldest known temple on Earth, Göbekli Tepe, rewrote everything. 12,000 years old, built when humanity was still supposed to be chasing herds across ice plains. And yet its pillars are carved with animals, symbols, constellations, a language of stone from an age that had no writing. Its builders buried it deliberately, as if protecting a secret meant for another world. When it was unearthed in the 1990s, the academic world tried to fit it into the old story. But it does not fit. Nothing about it fits. The question is not only who built it, but what memory they were preserving from a time already fading into myth. Some scholars now whisper that Göbekli Tepe might be the last remnant of a forgotten civilization, one that perished in the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas, a world that once stretched across continents, erased not by conquest, but by fire and flood. If true, it would explain the uncanny alignment of myths that follow. The deluge of Noah, the sinking of Atlantis, the destruction of Mu in Pacific legends, the Mayan memory of a world burned and drowned before the current sun was born. These stories are not merely allegories, they are echoes. They preserve the trauma of a world that ended suddenly and completely, a collective scar etched into humanity's dream. The idea of a lost world is not new. In the early 20th century, before it became unfashionable to dream, explorers like Colonel Percy Fawcett roamed the Amazon searching for the city he called Z, a place of stone and light hidden beneath the canopy. He vanished in 1925, swallowed by the forest. Years later, satellite scans revealed geometric mounds and vast networks of ancient roads beneath the soil, evidence of complex societies long erased by jungle and time. For centuries, scientists had declared the Amazon uninhabitable for civilization, too poor in nutrients to sustain cities. And yet, the Earth itself disagrees. The traces remain. Perhaps the same blindness has followed us across the globe. In the depths of the Pacific, sonar has mapped vast plateaus, terraces, and walls that do not conform to natural geology. Off the coast of Cuba, divers claim to have found structures resembling pyramids 2,000 feet below the surface. The photographs are blurry, the reports contested, but the possibility lingers. What if the flood myths are not metaphors, but memories of coastlines swallowed when the ice sheets melted, erasing entire continents? Even language carries traces of something older. Comparative linguists have long noted peculiar patterns, shared roots, shared symbols, shared myths, that suggest all ancient tongues may descend from one primal source. They call it proto-world, a hypothetical mother language from which all human speech diverged. But such a concept defies the accepted model of isolated development. To exist, it would require a unified culture, a global network of communication predating any known civilization. And yet, ancient words for sky, water, fire, and gods share uncanny phonetic echoes across continents. Perhaps language, too, remembers what our history forgot. If the Earth has been home to more than one civilization, what happens when one vanishes? Do the survivors become myths? Do they watch from the periphery of time, leaving symbols for those who come after? In 1968, a diver named Dr. Valentine Marcelino explored the waters off the Bahamian coast near Bimini. There he found a perfectly straight line of megalithic stones stretching for hundreds of meters beneath the turquoise waves. Some dismissed it as a natural formation. Others saw something more: the remains of an ancient causeway, perhaps the edge of Plato's Atlantis itself. The Bimini Road, as it came to be called, remains a quiet heresy. Its stones, cut and placed with geometric precision, resist simple explanation. And in the years that followed, similar formations were found in the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and even beneath Lake Titicaca in the Andes. The same pattern: great structures submerged, silent beneath water and sediment, as though Earth itself were hiding its past. Legends from the Andes tell of Viracocha, a tall, bearded teacher who emerged from the sea after the Great Flood, bringing the knowledge of architecture and astronomy. The Polynesians tell of Tangaroa, who rose from the waves to guide their ancestors. The Dogon of Mali speak of Nomo, amphibious beings who descended from the sky, bearing the wisdom of the stars. Across oceans, across millennia, these stories converge. Beings from water or sky who rekindled human culture after a great destruction. Myths, perhaps, or fragmented memories of those who survived the last cycle. Geologists studying sea level rise note that between 14,000 and 7,000 BCE, the oceans rose over 120 meters, enough to swallow every coastal settlement on Earth. 90% of humanity's early history would now lie beneath the waves, unseen. If civilization once flourished along those ancient shores, its ruins would now rest in darkness, silted over by the slow breathing of the sea. Perhaps the reason we find so little evidence is not because it never existed, but because we have been looking on land when the truth sleeps underwater. There are, too, the strange alignments, the invisible threads connecting monuments across continents. The Great Pyramid, the Nazca Lines, Easter Island, Angkor Wat, all lie along a single great circle that spans the globe, matching latitudes and astronomical alignments with near impossibility. Engineers explain it away as coincidence. But in a world where no technology for global measurement was known, coincidence becomes fragile. It is as if the Earth itself was once mapped from above, the geometry of its sacred points marked and remembered. To some, this idea feels too grand, too mythic, too unsettling. It threatens the comfortable narrative of progress, that civilization is the slow ascent of reason from ignorance. Yet every fragment of the forgotten world implies something else: cycles of rise and fall, ages of light followed by darkness, the same story repeating beneath different suns. The Mayans called these epochs suns. The Hindus named them yugas. The Greeks spoke of the ages of man. Each tradition ends the same way, with a fall, a cleansing, a beginning again. Science stands at the threshold of memory and refuses to cross. It peers into the sediment and the sky, searching for measurable truths. But sometimes, the truth is too large to measure. In the fossil record, there are gaps, missing bones, missing links, entire chapters lost to extinction. In archaeology, There are out-of-place artifacts, metal spheres in Precambrian rock, human footprints beside trilobites, the Baghdad battery, the Antikythera mechanism. Each anomaly is dismissed, isolated, stripped of context. But together they form a constellation, points of light outlining a shape we are not yet ready to name. Maybe that shape is us. For what if humanity is not the beginning, but the continuation of something older? What if civilization is not progress, but recovery? Each discovery, each temple, each myth, perhaps they are fragments of a memory we have been trying to rebuild since the last dawn. The story of the builders, the watchers, the survivors who once held the knowledge of the stars and lost it in the flood. And so we wander among their remnants, tracing their silence. We find their shadows in the stones of Baalbek, where blocks weighing over 1,000 tons lie fitted with impossible precision. We feel them in the acoustics of Newgrange, where the winter solstice sun still pierces the tomb like a heartbeat from the past. We sense them in the alignment of Stonehenge, where sound, light, and gravity converge as though the builders were not merely engineers, but conductors of Earth's own frequencies. These places hum, not metaphorically, but literally. Seismic studies show resonances beneath them, as if tuned to planetary vibrations. Were these temples not just monuments, but instruments? The ancients spoke of harmony between heaven and earth, the music of the spheres, the sacred tone that keeps the cosmos in balance. Perhaps their monuments were not expressions of religion, but mechanisms of remembrance, stone symphonies preserving a knowledge of resonance, geometry, and consciousness, a science that measured not only space, but the soul. In the end, the greatest mystery may not be what they built. But why? Why leave such messages in stone? Why align them to stars that will one day drift from sight? Perhaps because they knew we would forget. Because memory, like civilization, is fragile, and stone endures longer than flesh. If these ancestors, these gods, these survivors of an earlier age, wished to speak across time, they could only speak in silence, in monuments, myths, and mathematics. And perhaps, in some quiet way, they still are. Tonight, if one listens closely to the deep hum of the earth, to the rhythm beneath the noise of the world, there's a strange familiarity to it, as though the planet itself is trying to remind us of a forgotten chord, a song we once knew before history began. There are nights when the stars seem too deliberate, placed not by chaos, but by memory. Constellations whisper of a pattern older than any language, a design that speaks through myth and mathematics alike. Somewhere between the orbits of planets and the tilt of the Earth lies a rhythm that ancient cultures once understood intuitively, a cosmic heartbeat linking heaven and humanity. Perhaps that is why nearly every civilization raised its eyes to the same sky and built toward it, stone by stone, as if mirroring a forgotten map. The sky has always been a script. To the Egyptians, it was the body of the goddess Nut, arching over creation. To the Maya, it was the living calendar of time itself. The Sumerians recorded the movements of stars not for curiosity, but remembrance. Across the world, in temples, ziggurats, and observatories, the same alignment recurs. The 3 stars of Orion's belt, the Pleiades, Sirius. They appear in myths as hunters, sisters, dogs of light. But in the geometry of the Earth, they mark something else, the points of origin. At Giza, The three pyramids reflect the alignment of Orion's belt with near-perfect precision. Their angles correspond to celestial declinations that only matched the night sky around 10,500 BCE, the same epoch the Sphinx faces the rising of Leo. In that age, according to geological studies, heavy rainfall shaped the Sphinx's body, evidence that it predates the desert itself. Egyptologists resist this idea, for it shatters the known chronology. But if true, then Giza may not be the product of the Egyptians at all, but an inheritance, an echo of an earlier civilization that measured the stars before the sands existed. It is here, between astronomy and myth, that the greatest question hides. Who first marked the sky, and why did they insist on encoding its pattern into stone? The same stellar triads appear at Teotihuacan in Mexico, in the pyramids of China, and even in ruins across the Andes. Civilizations supposedly separated by oceans and millennia chose the same celestial coordinates to define their sacred architecture. Coincidence, they say. Yet the probability collapses under its own weight. In the 1960s, engineer and author Robert Bauval proposed the Orion correlation theory, arguing that ancient monuments were designed as mirrors of the heavens, a reflection of cosmic order on Earth. His hypothesis was met with skepticism, yet it explains too much to ignore. The ancients did not see the heavens as distant. They believed the stars were the source, not metaphorically, but physically. The phrase, "as above, so below," was not poetry. It was instruction. Humanity, they said, came from the stars and would one day return. Modern science, in its own way, has circled back to that idea. The discovery of panspermia, the hypothesis that life's building blocks traveled to Earth aboard comets, echoes what the ancients always implied. We are, quite literally, made of stardust. Yet that truth feels incomplete, as though there's something more personal in the connection, something that memory once held. Among the Dogon tribe of Mali, long before telescopes existed, elders spoke of a star invisible to the eye, orbiting Sirius, the companion star, they called it. They knew it was small, dense, and took 50 years to complete its orbit. When astronomers finally confirmed the existence of Sirius B, a white dwarf, the accuracy was staggering. How could they have known? Some suggest contact, knowledge passed down from beings the Dogon described as amphibious teachers, descending from the sky. The same image appears in Babylonian, Sumerian, and even Mesoamerican myths. Beings linked to water, to creation, to the stars. These recurring symbols, fish, serpents, boats, eggs, and light, may not be metaphors at all. They may represent technology rendered incomprehensible by time. To a society of stone and bone, any light descending from the heavens would seem divine. Yet beyond literalism, there's something more profound. The sense that humanity was seeded, guided, and then left to remember. Every great leap in human civilization seems to appear suddenly, without clear origin. The invention of writing, metallurgy, agriculture, all erupt like spontaneous fire. But fire does not start without spark. Some historians attribute this to diffusion, others to coincidence. But perhaps these leaps were moments of reactivation, when fragments of an older memory resurfaced. Göbekli Tepe may have been one such ignition, Egypt another. Even now, deep beneath our feet, forgotten calendars track the movements of the heavens. The Maya built their entire chronology around cycles of celestial rebirth. The long count calendar ends and begins not in apocalypse, but renewal. The Vedic texts of India describe vast cycles called yugas, each marking the rise and fall of human consciousness, not merely civilization. According to them, we are not evolving upward, but moving through repeating ages of light and shadow, ascending and descending in awareness. When the ancients spoke of gods descending from the sky, they may not have meant physical beings at all, but consciousness itself. Periods when human perception aligned with a greater pattern, only to fall again into amnesia. The deeper one looks into history, the more it feels less like a line and more like a spiral, a memory retold in layers, forgotten, rediscovered, then misunderstood. The flood myths, the sky gods, the alignments, all remnants of something cyclical. Even the physical earth bears the scars of repetition, craters, melt layers, sudden extinctions. Each time, life returns changed, carrying the residue of what came before. In that sense, humanity may not be a beginning, but an echo. The ancients seemed to know this. Their temples were not built merely to worship, but to remember. The alignment of the Great Pyramid captures the solstices and equinoxes with mathematical precision. Its proportions encode the ratio of the Earth to the Moon, the curvature of the planet, and the constant P/P. None of these values should have been known to Bronze Age builders, yet they appear carved in stone. Likewise, the Angkor Wat complex in Cambodia mirrors the Draco constellation, marking a celestial pattern that will only repeat once every 26,000 years, the cycle of precession itself. How did so many ancient cultures measure the heavens with such exactitude without modern instruments? Some believe they inherited the knowledge from an earlier world. Others suggest that consciousness itself once functioned differently, that perception extended beyond physical senses, allowing humans to feel the geometry of the cosmos as part of their being. Ancient texts often describe knowledge as remembrance, not discovery, as if learning meant awakening to what was already within. If this is true, then perhaps the collapse of ancient civilizations was not due to war or climate, but amnesia, a fall not of stone, but of mind. There are fragments in sacred texts that hint at this. The emerald tablets of Thoth, said to be older than Egypt itself, describe those who came from the stars and taught men the ways of light, warning of the sleep of forgetfulness that would one day descend. The Popol Vuh, the sacred Mayan book, recounts gods forming humans from different materials, first mud, then wood, and finally corn, the last capable of remembering. The Rig Veda speaks of beings who measured the earth and fixed the sky, then departed, leaving humans to find their way back through cycles of darkness. Perhaps these are not myths, but metaphors for consciousness itself, the long sleep of humanity between awakenings. Modern physics, curiously, echoes the same structure. Quantum theory suggests that observation shapes reality, that the act of seeing brings existence into form. The universe, then, is not a fixed mechanism, but a responsive field. What the ancients called the divine, we now call consciousness. What they described as ascent to the heavens may have been a metaphor for aligning perception with the cosmic field. In this light, temples were not shrines, but instruments, machines designed to tune human awareness to higher frequencies, to remember what we once were. Even the architecture supports this. The chambers of the Great Pyramid resonate at 432 Hz, a frequency that harmonizes with the Earth's Schumann resonance, the planet's natural vibration. Ancient cathedrals, too, were constructed around sacred ratios, their arches designed to amplify sound and light. It seems humanity has always built structures that sing back to the sky, perhaps unconsciously rebuilding what the ancients once perfected. The bridge between the seen and the unseen. There's a quiet sadness in this realization, that the further we advance technologically, the more we forget cosmologically. The ancients looked upward and saw home. We look upward and see distance. Yet the stars have not changed. The pattern remains, waiting for us to recognize it again. Maybe that's why the myths never fade, because they are not stories of the past, but signals for the future. They whisper of an origin that was not a single event, but a continuing dialogue, a relationship between Earth and the cosmos, teacher and student, light and clay. The question is not whether we were visited, but whether we have remembered who we are. And so, when one stands beneath a clear night sky and feels that inexplicable pull, as though the body itself is responding to something familiar, it may not be imagination. It may be the echo of an older knowing, buried beneath centuries of silence. We are told that the stars are cold and indifferent. But what if they are mirrors? What if, somewhere among them, lies the memory of our beginning, waiting for us to look long enough, not to discover but to remember? As the constellations drift imperceptibly across millennia, their light becomes our inheritance, their pattern our unspoken scripture. And in that slow, silent movement, the universe itself seems to murmur a single truth, that the story of humanity did not begin on Earth. It merely continued here. There are ruins the Earth has tried to bury, as if the planet itself wished to protect their memory from being disturbed again. Beneath jungles, deserts, and oceans lie remnants that do not fit the timeline of human history. Structures that whisper of a lost intelligence, one that may have preceded our known civilizations by tens of thousands of years. Each discovery is like a flicker of light breaking through the sediment of forgetting. Each fragment daring to suggest that humanity's first chapter was written long before we began recording it. Off the western coast of India, in the Gulf of Kambat, sonar scans in the early 2000s revealed vast geometric patterns beneath the murky depths, avenues, walls, and rectangular foundations covering miles of ocean floor. The site was dated to at least 9,000 years old, older than any known city on Earth. Divers recovered pottery fragments, fossilized bones, and tools buried under silt. Yet the discovery vanished quietly from headlines, dismissed as natural formations. But to those who have seen the scans, the shapes are too deliberate, too symmetrical. If the Gulf of Kambat is real, it means that complex urban planning existed before history was supposed to begin. It would mean that civilization did not emerge. It re-emerged. Farther south, on the Indonesian island of Java, stands Gunung Padang, a hill that archaeologists once believed to be natural. But beneath its green slopes lies a structure so ancient it rewrote every timeline. Core samples revealed layers of stone arranged in perfect order, extending more than 30 meters deep. Beneath the surface temple, which locals have long called the Mountain of Light, lies an older foundation dated to around 24,000 years ago. That is 13 millennia before the first pyramids. The mainstream scientific community resisted the findings, arguing the data must be wrong, but ground-penetrating radar confirmed it again and again. A massive, deliberate construction, built in layers, as if each age rebuilt upon the memory of the one before. Who were those builders, and where did they learn their craft? Legends across Southeast Asia tell of Lemuria, or Mu, a vast continent that once stretched across the Indian and Pacific Oceans, home to an advanced civilization that vanished beneath the sea. The Tamil texts of South India speak of Kumari Kandam, a lost land swallowed by rising tides, where poets and astronomers once studied the stars. In Polynesia, oral traditions recall a motherland beyond the horizon, a place of light from which their ancestors journeyed after the ocean rose to swallow the sun. It sounds like myth, and perhaps it is. Yet in these stories, one hears a strange consistency, as though they were fragments of the same broken memory scattered by the tides. Geologists tell us that around 10,000 BCE, the last ice age ended abruptly. Global temperatures soared, glaciers melted, and sea levels rose more than 100 meters in less than 1,000 years. If a coastal civilization had existed then, its cities would now lie hidden beneath the continental shelves. 90% of ancient human settlements would be underwater, unreachable by the tools of modern archaeology. Perhaps that is why the oldest ruins we find are already sophisticated, because the simpler beginnings remain beneath the waves, drowned along with their creators. There are whispers, too, of things found that were never meant to be known. In the 1960s, Soviet oceanographers mapping the floor of the Atlantic discovered an enormous plateau with geometric ridges near the Azores. They named it the Atlantis Massif, though officially it remains a natural formation. Yet photographs taken by deep-sea submersibles show what appear to be terraces, right angles, and roads half buried under silt. In the same region, sonar images captured enormous vertical columns, some rising hundreds of meters from the seabed, like the stumps of a lost city swallowed by darkness. The ocean keeps its secrets well. But Atlantis is not only Plato's allegory, it is a warning. He described it as a great empire that fell in a single day and night of misfortune, consumed by water and fire. For centuries, scholars treated it as metaphor, a story about hubris. Yet Plato insisted it was history, passed down from the Egyptian priests to Solon, then to him. The priests claimed the event occurred 9,000 years before their own time, aligning almost perfectly with the cataclysm at the end of the Ice Age. If his account holds even a kernel of truth, then Atlantis was not a dream. It was a memory of the last great reset. Every culture carries the same memory under different names. The Hopi call it Palatquapi, the red city that fell into the earth. The Sumerians spoke of Eridu, the first city built before the flood. The Maya remembered Itzamna, who came from the east after his homeland sank beneath the waves. Even in the distant myths of Japan, there is Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven, lost in the mist when the world changed. It is as though the earth itself once turned a page, leaving only echoes between its lines. What could have destroyed an entire world so completely? Science offers several suspects: a comet strike, a supervolcanic eruption, a solar flare, a geomagnetic reversal. Evidence of cosmic trauma appears everywhere. In Greenland and North America, a layer of black sediment marks an event of sudden combustion around 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas boundary. Nanodiamonds, melt glass, and iridium trace suggest an impact so intense it reshaped climate and life itself. Mammoths vanished overnight, forests burned, and human cultures collapsed. If an advanced society had existed then, its end would have been absolute. The survivors would have become nomads, storytellers, mythmakers, trying to describe the impossible in the language of gods and fire. In the quiet aftermath, humanity began again. But they did not forget everything. They remembered the stars, the floods, the knowledge of cycles. They rebuilt the memory into myth, into ritual, into sacred geometry. They planted it in stone, knowing that one day, when the world once again forgot, someone would find the patterns and begin to remember. There are traces of technology that should not exist, artifacts that mock the limits of their supposed age. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from the Aegean Sea, is a mechanical computer made of bronze gears capable of predicting eclipses and planetary positions. Its craftsmanship rivals modern clockwork, yet it dates to over 2,000 years ago. In Colombia, small gold figurines shaped like airplanes were found in pre-Columbian tombs. Engineers later built scale models and discovered they were aerodynamically perfect. In Peru, vast lines etched into the desert form designs only visible from the sky: animals, spirals, humanoid figures. The Nazca people had no means of flight, yet they carved these images across miles of stone. Were they offerings or messages to something watching from above? Across time, humanity has always looked upward, as if seeking home. But what if those memories of sky and fire were not born of wonder, but of trauma? Perhaps our myths of gods descending from the heavens are recollections of something we witnessed long ago. Lights in the sky, thunder that burned, voices that came not as words but vibration. The ancient texts do not speak of belief, they speak of encounters. The Sanskrit epics describe the Vimanas, flying chariots of the gods, capable of crossing the heavens and unleashing weapons that could burn the world as many suns. In the Mahabharata, one battle describes a projectile charged with all the power of the universe that reduced entire cities to ash. Modern readers see poetry, but geologists studying ancient Indian sites have found layers of vitrified stone, rock melted by extreme heat, as if exposed to temperatures greater than any known fire. Similar vitrification appears in Scotland's hill forts and in the deserts of Libya. Could these have been natural events, or remnants of lost technologies misunderstood by their witnesses? Even more haunting is the recurring symbol of light and sound as instruments of creation. The Egyptians believed the world was sung into existence by Thoth, who spoke the sacred words that shaped reality. The Sumerians said the gods created with vibration, the me, the hidden code that governed all forms. Modern physics tells a similar story, that at the smallest scale, matter is vibration, energy condensed into pattern. It seems the ancients did not simply worship. They remembered how creation itself once spoke. If humanity once possessed such knowledge, how could it vanish so completely? Perhaps because power without wisdom consumes itself. Perhaps the last civilization fell not by nature's wrath, but by its own hand. Technologies misused, energies unleashed, balance broken. Every myth of the fall echoes this lesson. The Tower of Babel, the burning of Sodom, the flood, the sinking of Atlantis, always the same story, an ascent too far, a forgetting of harmony, a return to silence. And yet something survived. A fragment of memory carried through the blood, through dream, through story. A quiet awareness that the world has ended before and will end again, not as punishment, but as renewal. The earth breathes in ages, not years. Civilizations rise and fall like waves upon her surface. Each leaves behind a trace, a buried city, a shard of impossible craftsmanship, a symbol of a star. Perhaps that is why we are drawn to ruins, to the desolate beauty of stone overtaken by moss and time. Somewhere deep within, we recognize them. They are not just relics of a foreign past. They are mirrors of what we have been and may become again. At dusk, when the wind moves through those forgotten corridors, it almost sounds like voices. Faint, harmonic, neither human nor divine. Just the echo of something that once understood the rhythm of the world. And in that stillness, the boundary between myth and memory grows thin. The drowned continents, the fallen towers, the fires of the gods, they no longer feel like fantasy, but like prophecy. For the earth remembers, even when we do not. Beneath the thin crust of history lies a silence older than time, a silence that hums faintly through the bones of the earth. Some say it is imagination, but others, those who listen closely, believe it is memory. Not of humanity as we know it, but of something that came before, something vast and deliberate. For there are places where the planet itself seems engineered, where mountains align with mathematical precision, and where energy flows like a pulse through invisible veins beneath the soil. What if these patterns are not accidents of geology, but remnants of an ancient design? In the early 20th century, explorers began noticing something curious. Sacred sites around the world, the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, and Angkor Wat, all seemed to fall upon great circles around the globe, lines of alignment later called ley lines. Some dismissed it as coincidence, yet the precision defied chance. The ancients appeared to have mapped the earth as a whole, connecting monuments across continents that were supposedly isolated from one another. How could societies separated by oceans and epochs build structures harmonizing with one another's geometry? It suggested not random development, but orchestration. This pattern extends beyond architecture. Megalithic sites often share a strange property. They hum. Instruments sensitive to low-frequency vibration have detected standing waves around stone circles, pyramids, and temples, resonances aligned with the Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency, the Schumann resonance. It is as though these monuments were not built merely for ceremony, but to channel or amplify the planet's own energy. To the ancients, these may have been temples. To modern understanding, they look more like machines. Stonehenge, for instance, is not just a ring of rock. Acousticians have demonstrated that when drummed upon, or when wind moves through the stones, it produces harmonic frequencies identical to those found in the human brain during deep meditation. In the hypogeum of Halsaflieni in Malta, an underground temple carved over 5,000 years ago, certain chambers resonate perfectly at 110 Hz, the frequency known to stimulate the right hemisphere of the brain, altering consciousness. In Egypt, the king's chamber inside the Great Pyramid vibrates at a harmonic multiple of the same frequency. Were these coincidences, or the remnants of a science we no longer understand? A science that measured not only matter, but mind? Ancient cultures did not separate the physical and the spiritual. To them, the world was a symphony of vibration, and the key to creation lay in harmony. Modern physics quietly echoes that belief, that every atom vibrates, that all matter is frequency, and that reality itself may be music slowed into form. Perhaps the ancients did not worship sound. They used it. The legends of Atlantis speak of temples that sang, of crystals that hummed, of structures that drew power from the Earth's magnetic field. In Tibet, monks are said to have lifted stones into the air through chanting and the synchronized beating of drums, directing sound waves against gravity itself. A 1930s Swedish engineer, Henry Kjellson, recorded these accounts, describing how monks used horns arranged in precise arcs to levitate blocks along cliff faces. While never confirmed, similar tales appear in South American lore, where ancient builders were said to soften stone with sound before fitting it together like liquid. Even in modern laboratories, scientists have demonstrated acoustic levitation, particles suspended in air by vibration alone. What if the ancients had mastered this principle on a scale we can scarcely imagine? Some researchers now speculate that the megaliths served as nodes in a planetary network, a grid of resonance that stabilized energy across the globe. The Earth itself generates electromagnetic waves that pulse between the ground and the ionosphere. Ancient structures, aligned to those frequencies, could have acted as amplifiers or regulators, maintaining planetary balance. It sounds like myth, yet satellite data reveals subtle anomalies in gravity and magnetism precisely along the paths of these ancient alignments. Even today, pilots report instrument malfunctions when flying over certain regions, such as the Nazca Plateau or the Bermuda Triangle, areas that correspond eerily with these invisible lines. If such a network once existed, who built it? And to what purpose? In ancient Sumer, the gods were said to have measured the heavens and laid down the plans of the earth. In Egypt, Thoth was called the Lord of Measurement. In the Andes, Viracocha was said to have drawn lines of power across mountains and seas. These were not metaphors. They described an act of architecture on a planetary scale. Perhaps these gods were not divine in the supernatural sense, but custodians of a science that united energy, matter, and consciousness into one continuum. The remnants of that science still linger. At Tiahuanaco in Bolivia, stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons fit together with joints so precise they are airtight. Some contain interlocking copper clamps melted into place by heat beyond any primitive method. In Baalbek, Lebanon, a single foundation stone, the trilithon, measures over 1,000 tons, perfectly balanced upon smaller stones beneath it. No modern crane could lift it. These are not monuments to faith. They are engineering beyond our reach. And scattered among them, one finds carvings of gears, patterns resembling circuitry, even star maps etched into granite. It is as if the builders were leaving us clues in a language of form. The deeper question is not how they built, but why. What purpose would demand such scale, such precision? Some ancient traditions offer an answer. Resonance. They believed that the earth itself is alive, that it breathes and vibrates, and that to remain in balance, humanity must tune itself to the planet's frequency. When that harmony was broken, when greed, war, or ignorance disrupted the flow, the earth would shake it off, resetting the cycle through destruction. Perhaps that is the true meaning of the floods and fires spoken of in sacred texts, not divine wrath, but the rebalancing of energy. In the 1990s, satellite imaging over Egypt revealed buried geometric patterns beneath the sand, spreading far beyond the known pyramids. Lines, grids, and faint circular formations. Some appear to align with distant ruins thousands of kilometers away. It is as if all ancient architecture was part of a single plan, executed across ages by hands remembering something long forgotten. The Great Pyramid, with its golden ratio proportions and electromagnetic anomalies, may have been more than a tomb. It may have been the central node in that global network. Even the ancients seemed to know this structure was not theirs. Egyptian priests told Herodotus that their civilization was already old when the pyramids were built, that knowledge had been inherited from the gods. The inscriptions within the pyramid do not celebrate human kings. They speak of stars, of rebirth, of resurrection through light. The Book of the Dead refers to ascending through the gate of fire to the imperishable stars. The pharaoh's journey was not physical, it was vibrational. He was to become light itself. Perhaps that was the true purpose of the pyramid, not burial, but transformation. Every ancient religion encodes this same message in different forms. The Buddhists call it nirvana. The Egyptians called it the field of reeds. The Mayans, Xibalba. In each, there is a journey from density to frequency, from matter back to light. The ancients may have believed that death was not the end, but a shift in vibration. To them, the body was clay animated by sound, and the soul was the echo that remained when the music stopped. Modern science, in its quiet way, is catching up. Quantum researchers have found that consciousness appears to influence matter, that the observer shapes the observed. In the strange language of physics, reality behaves as if aware of being seen. The ancients knew this intuitively. They built temples not to worship gods, but to focus awareness, to merge observer and observed into one harmonic field. Meditation, chant, geometry, and ritual were not religion. They were resonance engineering. Consider the Tibetan mandalas, the Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Celtic spirals, the labyrinths of Crete, all intricate patterns meant to draw the mind into stillness. These are not random art forms. They are visual frequencies, coded prayers. When one contemplates them, the brain's rhythm slows, aligning with Earth's natural resonance. The same is true of ancient chants. The OM of Hinduism vibrates at 432 Hz, the same frequency encoded into the Great Pyramid's design. Coincidence or memory? It seems that every fragment of our forgotten past points to the same truth, that humanity once lived in synchrony with the planet, understanding energy not as fuel, but as consciousness itself. When that balance was lost, the world fell silent. The temples became ruins, the chants became myths, and the frequencies that once harmonized the earth faded into noise. But perhaps not entirely. There are places, certain deserts, mountains, even ruins, where the veil between memory and presence grows thin. Those who have visited describe sensations of weightlessness, flashes of soundless light, a hum that resonates in the chest rather than the ear. It is as though the earth is still trying to sing, still trying to awaken what sleeps within us. Maybe that is the true meaning of awakening, not enlightenment in the spiritual sense, but remembrance. To awaken is to recall what we have always known, that we are not separate from the planet, but part of its song. The ancients tried to tell us this, through stone, through story, through silence. They built their wisdom into geometry so it would outlast the ages. And now, as we rediscover their alignments and frequencies, it feels less like revelation and more like reunion. Perhaps the earth is preparing to sing again. There are moments when the wind carries a memory, a low vibration that seems to speak not in words, but in recognition. It travels through the deserts of Egypt, across the Andes, and into the hollow silence of forgotten tombs. Those who pause to listen say the earth is whispering, not about the past, but about a cycle returning. For the ancients never spoke of time as a line. To them, history moved like breath, in and out, creation and collapse, memory and forgetting. Each rise of civilization was not progress, but recurrence. What came before will come again, they said, because it must. The myth of the ages appears everywhere. The Greeks divided time into the golden, silver, bronze, and iron ages, each a step further from harmony. The Hindus told of yugas, vast epochs of spiritual descent and rebirth. The Hopi spoke of 4 worlds, each destroyed when humanity lost balance with the earth. The Maya recorded their suns, each extinguished in flood or fire before a new dawn. These are not coincidences. They are the same rhythm, the same remembrance, expressed through different tongues. And every version ends the same way, with a fall. In the Sanskrit texts, the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, marks the end of the cycle, a time of confusion when humanity forgets its origin, when knowledge becomes fragmented, and when those who remember are called mad. Some say that is the age we live in now. But if there is an end, then there must also be a beginning waiting within it. Modern science often dismisses cycles as superstition, yet even the cosmos breathes in rhythm. Galaxies pulse, stars are born and die in intervals, and the earth itself moves through grand patterns, the precession of the equinoxes, the oscillations of its magnetic field, the heartbeat of solar cycles. The ancients might have known these rhythms not as data, but as feeling. Their temples, aligned with solstices and equinoxes, were not merely observatories, they were reminders. They marked the turning of ages, when the veil between worlds thinned, and something from the old cycle returned. The last great turning may have been 12,000 years ago, when the world froze and burned in the same breath. Geological records show that the Younger Dryas ended abruptly with a massive temperature spike. Ice melted, oceans rose, and species vanished. Something struck the earth, perhaps a comet, perhaps the sun's fury unleashed. Entire ecosystems collapsed within decades, yet among the ashes, humanity endured. And from that endurance came the strange flowering of civilization, agriculture, writing, astronomy. It was as if memory itself had been reawakened, as though the survivors of a lost world had begun again, carrying fragments of forgotten knowledge into a new dawn. If cycles are real, then history is not a progression, but a heartbeat. Each rise and fall a pulse of consciousness expanding and contracting. The Golden Age, then, was not utopia, but alignment, a time when humanity lived in harmony with the cosmic field. The fall came not from sin, but from amnesia. The deeper humanity fell into density, into materialism, fear, and separation, the further it drifted from the music of the spheres. Perhaps that is why so many ancient texts describe knowledge as light. The emerald tablets speak of a sun behind the sun, a hidden source that illuminates not through flame, but through awareness. When that light wanes, humanity sleeps. When it returns, the world remembers. Some physicists now speculate that consciousness itself may be a fundamental field, an ocean from which all reality arises. What mystics called spirit, what scientists call the quantum field, may be one and the same. If so, the ages are simply shifts in how deeply humanity can resonate with that field. But if our ancestors once lived in alignment with such knowledge, what broke the harmony? Across myth and scripture, one pattern repeats: rebellion. In Sumer, the gods divided over the fate of humankind. In Egypt, Set killed Osiris, fracturing the cosmic order. In the Greek world, Prometheus stole fire from the heavens, gifting forbidden knowledge to man. The fall was not ignorance, it was pride. Humanity sought to command the forces it once harmonized with. The ancient symbol of the serpent devouring its own tail, the Ouroboros, is not only a sign of eternity, but of imbalance, creation consuming itself. Perhaps the last age ended because humanity reached too far into powers it did not understand. Legends of Atlantis echo this, an advanced world undone by its misuse of energy. Plato wrote that the Atlanteans possessed great power, but in their pride they lost the virtue that guarded it. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers, celestial beings who descended and taught forbidden arts, metallurgy, weaponry, and enchantment. Humanity, unready for such gifts, turned them to destruction. The flood came not as vengeance, but as mercy, to wash away what had grown too heavy for the earth to bear. And so the cycle reset. The survivors scattered across mountains and deserts, preserving fragments of knowledge in myth and stone. They remembered the alignments, the geometry, the songs of resonance. They rebuilt, smaller, slower, as if afraid to awaken too quickly. The gods retreated into story, the temples became tombs, and memory sank into dream. Yet the earth never forgets. Beneath the crust, magnetic records show periodic reversals, times when the poles flip, when the planet's field weakens, allowing cosmic radiation to pour in. Each reversal coincides with upheaval, mass extinctions, geological chaos, and the erasure of civilizations. Scientists call them natural phenomena. The ancients called them renewals. In both languages, the meaning is the same. Every few tens of millennia, the world is remade. Could it be that we are nearing such a turning again? The magnetic North Pole is drifting faster than ever recorded, racing across the Arctic at 40 kilometers a year. Solar activity grows unpredictable. Climates shift, oceans warm, and species vanish. The same omens described by the old texts, fire in the sky, trembling earth, the thinning of the veil, appear once more. To the modern mind, they are climate patterns, physics, and statistics, but to the old mind, they were signs, the pulse quickening before renewal. The Maya called this transition the fifth sun. The Hopi call it the Great Purification. The Hindus call it the dawn of the Satya Yuga, the return to truth. None speak of apocalypse, but of transformation. The end of one frequency, the birth of another. Humanity, they say, will either remember or perish, but perhaps remembrance is already happening. Everywhere, ancient knowledge resurfaces, in forgotten texts, unearthed ruins, rediscovered sciences of vibration and light. The Internet, paradoxically, mirrors the global web once spoken of in myth, a network uniting minds, reviving stories once scattered by distance. For the first time in thousands of years, the fragments are speaking to each other again. Historians, mystics, scientists, dreamers, all tugging at the same thread. Who were we before we forgot? There is a haunting feeling that something vast is returning, not as gods descending, but as memory rising. The same curiosity that built pyramids now builds telescopes. The same desire that once mapped the heavens now maps the atom. Science and spirituality, long divided, are beginning to speak the same language again. Frequency, vibration, field, light. Perhaps this reconciliation is not progress, but return. The ancients described awakening not as discovery, but as remembering. They believed that truth was never lost, only veiled by the noise of the world. Beneath every religion, every myth, lies the same shape, a spiral, turning inward toward the heart. That is where the lost knowledge hides, not in ruins or scrolls, but in the stillness between breaths, where the echo of the universe hums quietly within us. In the deepest meditation, monks describe hearing that hum, a resonance not of the ear, but of the soul. It is said to be the sound of the cosmos, the syllable AUM, the first vibration from which all things unfolded. If that is true, then creation never stopped. It continues in every moment, in every heartbeat, in every thought. We are not passengers within the cycle. We are the cycle itself. Perhaps that is the meaning of the phrase carved on temple walls and whispered in countless tongues, "Know thyself." For to know the self is to know the universe. The same light that burns in the stars burns behind the eyes. The same vibration that shapes galaxies hums in the marrow of our bones. And when humanity finally remembers this, the cycle will turn once more, not into darkness, but into dawn. For now we live in the pause between ages. The world trembles, the old systems crumble, and the air hums with anticipation. Somewhere beneath the static of technology and noise, a quieter frequency is rising, one that feels both ancient and new. Perhaps it is the echo of the last civilization calling to us, or perhaps it is the earth herself singing us awake. When the winds shift and the stars realign, when silence feels heavier than sound, listen closely. The cycle is turning again. The memory of the first world stirs in the bones of the last. And once more, light prepares to return through the cracks of forgetting. Somewhere between dream and waking, there exists a realm of remembering, a thin place where the past does not feel like history, but like something breathing beneath the surface of now. It visits the edges of sleep, in the hush between thoughts, when the mind drifts beyond the tyranny of clocks. There, the stories of what came before whisper with a strange intimacy, as if the blood itself remembers. And in those moments, one senses that the ancient world was never truly gone. It merely withdrew, waiting for us to quiet down enough to hear it again. Archaeologists unearth fragments and call them discoveries, but perhaps it is the other way around. Perhaps we are the ones being found. For in recent decades, the earth has begun yielding secrets as though she has chosen this time to speak again. Melting ice, shifting sands, receding seas, all reveal remnants of things once hidden. It feels deliberate, like memory surfacing in the collective mind. In the frozen tundra of Siberia, satellite imaging has revealed geometric mounds stretching for miles, hexagonal patterns visible only from the air, eerily similar to the formations found in Peru and northern Africa. Scientists call them periglacial polygons, natural processes of thaw and freeze. But some of these lines form perfect right angles, their proportions matching sacred geometries found in ancient temple design. To those who study the forgotten past, it is not geology. It is a blueprint. Meanwhile, deep in Antarctica, radar scans beneath 2 kilometers of ice have detected vast anomalies, massive shapes with rectilinear structure, as if something sleeps beneath the frozen continent. The official reports describe subglacial mountains. Yet leaked images show patterns too precise to be natural. Circular formations like buried fortresses, symmetrical ridges, metallic echoes where no metal should exist. Some whisper that the ice conceals an ancient base, perhaps the last outpost of a civilization lost when the poles shifted. The myth of Hyperborea, the northern land of the gods, mirrors this idea, except that the axis may have turned, burying that north beneath the south. The Greeks wrote that Hyperborea was a place of eternal light, destroyed when the world tilted. Could Antarctica be its grave? Even the oceans seem restless, giving up their dead. Off the coast of Cuba, marine engineers scanning for shipwrecks found something astonishing. Structures nearly 2,000 feet underwater, resembling pyramids, roads, and domes. Their alignment mirrors constellations. Orion again. The site's age, based on sedimentation, suggests it sank more than 10,000 years ago. The footage remains classified. Officially, the discovery was a sonar anomaly. But the divers who glimpsed the shapes speak of cities of glass and stone, glimmering in the abyssal dark, as if frozen mid-collapse. Why does the same geometry, the same stellar pattern, keep returning in Egypt, in Mexico, in the Andes, in the sea? It is as though all ancient architecture were part of a single network, a planetary grid built to communicate across ages. Some physicists now speak of a resonant Earth, an electromagnetic field linking all living systems, a web of frequencies that carries not only energy, but information. The ancients may have known how to interact with it. Their temples, aligned with the stars, were perhaps antennas, bridges between heaven and earth. Modern scientists have begun to sense the edges of this forgotten science. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural frequency, averages around 7.83 Hertz, the same frequency the human brain enters during deep meditation. Ancient chanting, drumming, and mantras all produce sound waves within that exact range. Coincidence or continuity? It seems that across the world, separated by oceans and millennia, humanity remembered the same truth, that consciousness itself can attune to the pulse of the planet. The temple was not a building. It was a tuning chamber for the mind. Some researchers, blending geology with myth, have proposed something extraordinary: that the Earth's energy grid corresponds to the placement of ancient sacred sites, forming a global lattice. The nodes, Giza, Stonehenge, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, Angkor, the Himalayas, fall precisely on intersections of geomagnetic anomalies. These power points, once mapped by megalith builders, could have served as conduits for planetary stabilization, or even as an ancient form of communication. In myth, these were the navels of the world, points where heaven touched earth. In physics, they might be resonant frequencies where energy flows most freely. The two languages describe the same thing, seen from different eyes. If this is true, then the ancients were not primitive at all. They were custodians of planetary equilibrium, stewards of a science that united consciousness with Earth's energy. But something went wrong. The harmony was broken, and the network fell silent. Some call it catastrophe, others consequence. When the temple stopped resonating, when humanity's collective vibration shifted into fear, greed, and dissonance, the planet responded. Floods, fires, quakes, the natural discharge of imbalance. In this view, the great disasters of the past were not random, but reflex. The earth purges, resets, renews. Civilizations rise again, carrying faint echoes of the old harmony, but always forgetting a little more each time. The cycle is merciful and cruel, an endless forgetting and remembering, and yet memory never dies. It hides. Certain initiatory traditions claim that remnants of the ancient knowledge were preserved in secret schools in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Tibet, and later in the mystery cults of Greece. The Pythagoreans, for instance, taught that reality was constructed through number and tone, that the universe itself was a harmonic ratio. Their temples were built according to these proportions, echoing the same sacred geometry once encoded in megaliths. Plato, who inherited these teachings, spoke of a world soul, a living field connecting all matter. He called it anima mundi. In Egypt, the priests of Thoth guarded books of the hidden chamber, said to describe the science of immortality through frequency and light. The Hermetic texts that survived hint at this knowledge. As above, so below, as within, so without. To the uninitiated, these were words of philosophy. To the initiates, they were equations. Consciousness, energy, and form were mirrors of the same essence. To change one was to change all. In later centuries, these fragments resurfaced as alchemy. But alchemy was not about gold. It was about transmutation of the soul. The true philosopher's stone was vibration, the resonance that turned dense matter into light. This ancient pursuit, to transform consciousness, was the continuation of what the builders of megaliths began. Today, modern physics edges perilously close to the same threshold. The language has changed, but the spirit remains. Scientists now describe reality as a quantum field, waves collapsing into particles through observation. Awareness is not passive, it participates. The ancients would have smiled at this, for they already knew. They called it the music of the spheres. And yet, for all our progress, we stand once more at the brink of forgetting. Our technology has given us the power once attributed to gods, to split the atom, to alter genes, to reshape the planet. But power without remembrance is perilous. The last age may have fallen for the same reason. The Atlanteans, it is said, learned to draw energy from the earth itself, but failed to respect its balance. Their crystal towers hummed with light, feeding cities and crafts that sailed the skies, until one day the harmony broke, the earth convulsed, the sea rose, silence returned. Now the signs return, the warming seas, the restless sky, the hum beneath the ground. Perhaps it is not doom, but awakening. The grid stirs again, and with it, the memory of who we once were. Around the world, people are drawn to sacred sites with renewed hunger. They travel not as tourists, but as pilgrims seeking resonance. They stand among stones older than history and feel vibrations in their chests. Some describe visions of light. Others simply cry without knowing why. The places remember, and through them, so do we. It may be that the earth herself is retuning. The magnetic field weakens, the poles drift, solar storms intensify. All physical signs, yet they mirror the ancient myths of the turning of ages. Perhaps this is not destruction, but recalibration, a return to harmony through chaos. If so, then the role of humanity is not to flee or to fight, but to listen, to align. The temples of the old world are gone, but the new temples are within. The brain, the heart, the DNA, all vibrate, all are instruments awaiting attunement. When emotion and thought harmonize, they generate coherence, a measurable field of energy. The ancients may have used sound, stone, and geometry to achieve what we can now reach through awareness alone. What happens when an entire species remembers at once? Some believe that is the next leap, not technological, but vibrational. A shift in collective consciousness, the long-awaited dawn described in every prophecy. It will not arrive through catastrophe, but through resonance, the return of the song that once bound heaven and earth. When that moment comes, perhaps the monuments will awaken too. The stones will hum again, the grid will shine, and the earth will breathe in rhythm with her children. The myths will no longer be myths, but instructions we finally understand. For the ancients never wrote history. They wrote reminders. They left markers across time, not to glorify their past, but to guide our return. Each alignment, each symbol, each whisper carved into rock says the same thing. Remember, the question is not whether the lost civilization existed, but whether we still carry its frequency inside us. Perhaps it is encoded in the DNA, waiting for resonance to awaken it again. The stars that once guided the builders still shine above us. The same geometry lives in our bones. The same rhythm beats in our hearts. The memory was never gone. It was only asleep. And maybe tonight, under the quiet canopy of stars, the earth hums a little louder. Not as a warning, but as a welcome. The circle is closing. The ancient network stirs. The forgotten song begins again. When the night grows too still, when even the wind forgets to move, the earth seems to hold its breath. It is in that silence that memory speaks, not through words or sound, but through vibration. Those who listen closely say that the past is not gone at all. It hums faintly, like an ancient chord stretched across time, waiting to be heard again. Perhaps what we call history is merely the visible residue of something that never stopped echoing. In recent decades, strange discoveries have begun to align with old myths, as though science is stumbling upon the very stories it once dismissed. Deep beneath the sands of Egypt, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar have found vast networks of tunnels and chambers beneath the Giza Plateau. Corridors extending for kilometers, far beyond what the ancient Egyptians ever recorded. The air inside them has remained untouched for thousands of years. Yet some inscriptions on their walls speak not of pharaohs, but of those who came before the Nile. No one knows what that means. The data remains classified, sealed away under the familiar phrase, national heritage protection. But whispers from within the excavation teams speak of things that should not exist. Symbols identical to those found in Sumer, in the Andes, and even on the remote stones of Easter Island. Different continents, different ages, the same geometry, the same signature. If all of these cultures inherited the same pattern, then what was its source? In the deserts of Peru, beneath the Nazca lines, geophysical surveys have revealed chambers, vast stone-lined vaults beneath the ancient geoglyphs. Some believe they may hold ritual significance. Others suspect they were part of a communication system, a kind of energy relay that worked in harmony with the Earth's electromagnetic grid. When one stands upon those dry plains at dawn, the silence vibrates faintly underfoot, as if the ground itself remembers frequencies that once pulsed through it. The patterns repeat across the globe. At Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the temple complex mirrors the constellation of Draco, aligned perfectly to the precessional sky of 10,500 BCE. The same epoch that aligns with the Sphinx and Orion's belt in Egypt. Across the ocean, at Teotihuacan, The pyramids of the sun and moon mirror the same stars. The odds of such alignment being coincidence collapse into impossibility. It is as though ancient builders from every corner of the world worked from the same celestial blueprint, guided by knowledge that transcended geography. If there truly was a network of ancient sites linked by geometry and vibration, what was its purpose? Some propose it was spiritual, others think it was technological. But perhaps those words are not opposites. For to the ancients, energy and spirit were one. The temple, the pyramid, the ziggurat, each was an instrument designed to harmonize with the planet's energy field, amplifying consciousness. These were not places of worship. They were places of remembering. In recent years, physicists have discovered something they call quantum entanglement. Particles separated by distance, yet remaining connected, responding to each other instantly. Distance does not matter. The link exists beyond space. The ancients might have known this principle, not as mathematics, but as intuition. To them, everything was connected, stone to star, breath to wind, thought to light. When they built in alignment, they were not constructing, they were participating in the resonance of creation. Somewhere between science and myth lies another kind of evidence: sound. Researchers studying the acoustics of ancient sites have discovered that many temples were tuned to specific frequencies, tones that amplify human voice or heartbeat. At Chavin de Huantar in Peru, the labyrinthine corridors were designed to echo at 130 Hz, producing a trance-inducing vibration. At the hypogeum of Malta, the same resonance occurs at 110 Hz. In the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, 432 Hz dominates, a frequency long considered sacred. Modern musicians and physicists alike have noted that 432 Hz harmonizes perfectly with the natural frequency of the Earth. It is as though the entire ancient world sang in the same key. What happens to a species that forgets its own harmony? Perhaps that question defines us. For centuries, we have built machines that separate, that divide, that measure without meaning. The ancients built machines of alignment, temples that healed through resonance, monuments that spoke to the stars. Somewhere along the line, the thread was lost. We learned to dissect energy, but not to listen to it. We studied vibration as mechanics, not memory. And yet that memory lingers. It returns in dreams, in moments of inexplicable peace, in the way a certain sound can bring tears without reason. Some traditions still guard fragments of that ancient knowledge. The Tibetan monks who chant deep harmonics that cause stone walls to tremble. The Navajo singers who use sound to realign the sick with the frequencies of the earth. The Aboriginal Dreamtime stories that describe the world as sung into being. In each, there lies a shard of the same truth. Creation is not something that happened. It is something that continues, through sound, through consciousness. But what if that creative force is not only spiritual, but also physical, encoded in the very structure of the universe? Physicists speak of Planck resonance, the frequency at which the fabric of reality oscillates. It is unimaginably high, beyond measure, yet omnipresent. To touch it would be to see the world dissolve into vibration, to witness matter becoming music. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant by ascension. Not flight, but tuning. When the soul vibrates at the frequency of the source, it returns home. There are those who believe the Earth itself is approaching such a tuning. Solar activity is increasing, Magnetic poles are shifting, and subtle changes in the planet's frequency have been recorded. Some interpret this as coincidence. Others hear the beginning of a symphony. The same phenomena that once destroyed the old world may now be awakening the new. The cycles repeat, but this time, perhaps with awareness. Every civilization that fell left behind a warning disguised as a story. The flood, the fire, the tower that reached too high, all parables of imbalance. Each tells us that knowledge without harmony leads to collapse. Yet within every myth of destruction hides a promise that light returns. In the Popol Vuh, after the gods destroyed the wooden people who had forgotten their makers, they created humans of corn, those who could remember. The flood of Noah ends with a rainbow, a spectrum of vibration. Even the Tower of Babel, symbol of confusion, carries within it the seed of renewal, the scattering of tongues that would one day reunite through resonance. Perhaps the ancients were not warning us of wrath, but reminding us of rhythm. When harmony breaks, the cycle resets. But if we learn to listen, to the earth, to the stars, to the quiet hum within, perhaps the reset becomes awakening instead of ruin. Modern science may yet lead us there. Researchers in biophysics have found that human DNA responds to frequency, that certain sound patterns can repair damaged strands or alter genetic expression. It is as if the code of life itself is musical. The old texts spoke of this. The Egyptians called it the word that creates. The Hindus named it Nada Brahma. The universe is sound. Across ages and languages, the message remains unchanged. Our world is a song, and we are both its singers and its notes. If that is true, then every act of fear, every thought of separation, is dissonance. Every act of compassion, of creation, is harmony. The ancients built temples to sustain that harmony. We must now learn to build it within ourselves. Perhaps this is why ruins still move us so deeply. Standing before the stones of forgotten worlds, we feel both awe and grief, a recognition that something within us built this, and something within us lost it. The resonance still lingers there, faint but alive, calling us home. We cannot hear it with the ears, but with the body, with the part of the soul that remembers sound before words. The earth is tuning again. The cracks between ages widen. The solar winds grow louder. And somewhere within that rising vibration we are being invited, not to flee, not to fear, but to remember. The temples were never meant to last forever. They were seeds meant to awaken the same architecture within us. The new temples are not of stone, but of flesh, thought, and light. Humanity is the instrument now. Maybe this is what the old prophets foresaw when they spoke of the new heaven and new earth. Not destruction, but resonance restored. A moment when consciousness reawakens to its place in the great symphony of existence. When the old song returns, not as an echo, but as a living note sung once more through human breath. And when that happens, when the world hums again in harmony, the ruins will not seem dead. They will be remembered for what they truly were, tuning forks for the soul. Their purpose was never to dominate time, but to bridge it, to carry a single vibration through the ages until we could hear it again. Perhaps that time has come. There are places on this planet where silence feels sentient, where it doesn't merely fill space, but watches, waiting. The winds move differently there, slower somehow, like the air itself is listening for something. One such place lies deep within the highlands of Anatolia, where basalt cliffs rise like broken pillars and the ground hums faintly beneath the feet. It was there, long ago, that a buried circle of stones was raised by hands unknown. We call it Göbekli Tepe, but to the ancients, it was something far greater, a library of vibration carved into the bones of the earth. 12,000 years old, perhaps older, Göbekli Tepe rewrote the origin story of humanity. Its builders were not supposed to exist. They had no metal, no writing, no wheels, yet they cut and moved stones weighing 20 tons, aligning them precisely to the solstice stars. The carvings show animals that do not belong to that epoch, celestial maps marking a cataclysmic sky, and symbols repeated across continents centuries later. Scholars call it an enigma, but perhaps it was memory, one of the last outposts of a civilization that had survived the flood. The site was deliberately buried, sealed beneath tons of earth, as though its creators wished to preserve it for a future that had forgotten them. They must have known the world was ending. The air then was full of fire and dust, the oceans rising, the seasons twisting into chaos. The people who lived through it would have seen the sky burn and the rivers boil. To them, the end was not a myth. It was survival written in ash. So they built a monument, a message for whoever would come next, and then they vanished into legend. What were they trying to say? The pillars are carved with animals, foxes, serpents, cranes, lions, but beneath the art lies code. The patterns correspond to constellations. One pillar shows a scorpion above a swooping bird, mirrored exactly by Sagittarius and the galactic center in the sky of 10,150 BCE, the time of the Younger Dryas impact. Another shows the sun, eclipsed, surrounded by symbols for fire and flood. It is not decoration, it is record. Göbekli Tepe was a memorial, a warning, and a seed of knowledge left for the next dawn. Across the world, other seeds were planted. The pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Sumer, the mounds of the Americas, all echo the same geometry, the same stellar obsession. The ancients were not simply building upward, they were rebuilding memory. Each monument was a harmonic frequency, a stone transcription of what the sky had once looked like before the cataclysm. Together, they formed a map. A way to remember the rhythm of the heavens, so that when the next cycle came, the watchers could read the signs. Modern science, in its search for certainty, often overlooks rhythm. But nature moves in patterns, the magnetic reversals, the solar maximums, the precession of the equinoxes, the cycles of extinction and renewal. Every few tens of millennia, the planet trembles, the climate shifts, and the great forgetting begins again. To the ancients, this was not apocalypse, it was breath. The earth inhaled and exhaled civilizations, each rising like a tide and withdrawing into silence. We are the latest tide, standing at the edge of another breath. The evidence is subtle but relentless. In the ice cores of Greenland lie traces of radioactive isotopes that appear only during solar storms of incomprehensible magnitude, events powerful enough to erase technology in an instant. Tree rings from around the world show synchronized spikes in carbon-14, hinting at cosmic events that scorched the atmosphere thousands of years ago. The sun, too, has its rhythm. An 11-year heartbeat, a 1,000-year cycle, and a far greater pulse that resets life itself. When the solar wind falters, the Earth's shield weakens, and the world remembers its fragility. It is strange how closely this mirrors mythology. Ancient texts speak of the fire from the sky, of the day the sun stood still, of gods who descended in wrath. The Aztec Codex Borgia shows the sky raining serpents of flame. The Egyptian Book of the Dead calls it the day Ra grew weary of mankind and scorched the earth. Even the Bible remembers it as the time when the firmament broke and light became judgment. Could all of these be poetic memories of a solar catastrophe, a flare or plasma burst that struck the earth and reset the clock? The question is not whether it happened, but whether it will happen again. Some astrophysicists quietly admit that we are overdue. The magnetic poles continue to weaken, shifting by dozens of kilometers each year. Our satellites detect strange anomalies above the South Atlantic, where radiation dips unnaturally close to the surface. The Earth's heartbeat quickens. We may be entering another age of fire, a new reset, one that could erase all we've built if we refuse to remember the old harmony. But perhaps this time, the memory is returning. Ancient knowledge has begun resurfacing in modern science, like long-lost DNA awakening in the genome. The principles of resonance, vibration, and energy once spoken of in temples now find echoes in laboratories. Quantum physicists describe a universe woven not from matter, but from frequency, where particles are songs frozen into form. Biologists discover that cells communicate through electromagnetic fields, that DNA emits light, that emotion alters molecular structure. What the ancients called spirit, we now call coherence. Even in the modern world, echoes of the old design remain. Our cities pulse with invisible grids of electricity, data, and light, unconscious replicas of the planetary networks once drawn in stone. We have rediscovered the ability to manipulate energy, but not yet the wisdom to balance it. The ancients warned of this. In the myths of Atlantis, the final catastrophe came not from ignorance, but arrogance. They mastered the forces of the earth, but forgot their sacred responsibility to harmony. When the balance broke, the world followed. And so the question returns: are we repeating the same pattern? Perhaps the old cycle must play out until its lesson is learned. Yet the earth is not cruel. It teaches through rhythm, not revenge. Each collapse carries the seed of renewal. The flood that destroyed the old world also enriched its soil. The fire that burned its temples cleared the air for new light. The ancients knew this, that destruction and creation are one breath, that the end is not the opposite of beginning, but its continuation. In the deepest sense, humanity's journey has never been about conquest, but remembrance. Every generation tries to rebuild the world in stone, in steel, in code. But the true temple has always been the human mind, the one place that can hold eternity. The pyramids crumble, the monuments fall, yet the vibration persists, waiting to resonate again within consciousness. Each time the world resets, a few fragments survive: myths, songs, instincts. And from those, civilization is born anew. The survivors of the last age, whoever they were, must have understood this. They left not machines, but messages. They encoded their knowledge in geometry, music, and myth, languages that cannot be erased by time. We find them carved into basalt, sung in creation chants, echoed in sacred ratios. They knew that one day their children would rediscover those patterns and recognize them as mirrors of their own being. And in that recognition, the memory would awaken once more. Perhaps that awakening is happening now. As technology brings the world into a single network, as borders dissolve into information, humanity begins to think as one organism. The digital grid mirrors the planetary one. the same impulse to connect, to transmit, to remember. Yet what we build externally reflects what stirs internally. We are recreating the architecture of the ancients in the invisible, through frequency, through signal. The question remains whether we will use it as they did, to harmonize, or as Atlantis did, to dominate. In moments of stillness, when the noise of modern life fades, something older stirs. It can be felt in meditation, in music, in the strange ache of standing before an ancient ruin. It is not nostalgia, it is resonance. The vibration recognizes itself. The soul, after millennia of silence, hums faintly in tune with the earth. The old song returns quietly at first, then stronger as more remember. Perhaps this is the secret of evolution. Not the survival of the fittest, but the remembrance of the truest. The next step in humanity's journey will not be biological, but vibrational. A shift in awareness so complete that it redefines reality itself. The ancients called it the return of the light. The physicists might call it coherence. The poets will call it awakening. It is said that every age ends with a sound, a tone that ripples through matter, dissolving the old pattern to make room for the new. Maybe that tone has already begun. Maybe it's the hum beneath our cities, the rhythm of data, the pulse of our own heartbeat. Maybe it's the voice of the earth, calling us home again before the next sunrise of civilization. When that dawn arrives, the monuments will no longer be mysteries. We will understand why they faced the stars, why they sang in stone. We will know that the builders were not gods, but what we are becoming. The forgotten age will return, not as the past revived, but as the memory fulfilled. For the universe itself is cyclical, and consciousness is its echo. We are not at the end. We are at the pause before the inhale, the stillness before the next song begins. There are whispers that say the world has ended before, and will end again, not with fire or flood, but with remembering. That when the veil between matter and memory thins, humanity does not perish, it awakens. Perhaps we are living through such a threshold now, standing between what was and what will be, with fragments of forgotten ages surfacing like bones through shifting soil. Every discovery, every dream, every tremor of déjà vu feels like a signal from an older world asking to be heard once more. In the high plateaus of South America, at the ruins of Tiwanaku, lies a mystery that defies time itself. Carved from red sandstone and andesite, the monoliths bear markings that align perfectly with solstices and lunar cycles. The most famous, the Gateway of the Sun, is etched with symbols that have never been fully deciphered. Its central figure, part human, part radiant being, holds 2 rods, each surrounded by 30 rays. Some call it Viracocha, the god of creation. Others see it as something more, a record of the heavens, a celestial diagram mapping not only stars but frequencies. The gate once stood at the shore of a vanished lake, its surface polished like a mirror, reflecting the rising sun as though opening a portal of light. The stones themselves are fused, not carved, edges melted as if by intense heat or technology far beyond chisels. When struck, they ring like bells, resonating pure tones. The same phenomenon occurs in Egypt's granite temples and in the basalt walls of Baalbek. Across continents, ancient stone sings. Modern instruments detect magnetic anomalies at these sites, faint electromagnetic fields that fluctuate in rhythm with the Earth's heartbeat. It is as though the ancients built their monuments not for the eye, but for the ear, for the listening of the planet itself. If these structures were not merely symbolic, but functional, devices meant to interact with Earth's frequencies, then perhaps they were once part of a vast harmonic system, an ancient global network that stabilized or amplified the planet's energy field. Some call it the Earth Grid, others the Crystal Network, or the Ley Web. Whatever the name, the pattern is undeniable. Sacred sites, stone circles, pyramids, all arranged upon invisible lines of power that connect across oceans. The same pattern that geologists now identify as tectonic nodal points and magnetic intersections. What science sees as coincidence, the ancients understood as design. But what was this network for? One theory, whispered among both physicists and mystics, suggests it wasn't built for energy extraction, but consciousness amplification. That these sites were designed to tune the human mind to planetary resonance, to bridge the gap between individual awareness and the living field of Earth itself. The ancients called this the one mind, a state of collective coherence where humanity acted as a single organism, guided by intuition rather than fear. In such times, telepathy, prophecy, and creation by intention were not myth. They were natural expressions of alignment. There are faint echoes of this in our present world. Studies in neuroscience reveal that the heart generates an electromagnetic field thousands of times stronger than the brain's. When groups of people focus together in meditation or emotion, measurable changes occur in the environment, fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field itself. Modern instruments now confirm what the ancients lived by, that consciousness is not isolated, but participatory. Humanity, in its collective thought and feeling, shapes the very resonance of the planet. If so, then perhaps the rise and fall of civilizations are not accidents of history, but reflections of consciousness itself. When collective harmony weakens, the field collapses. The Earth resets, memory fragments, and from the silence, a new cycle begins. The oldest myths never describe humanity as separate from the gods. They describe humanity as forgetful children of the divine. In Sumerian legend, the Anunnaki did not create humans from nothing. They fashioned them by mixing the essence of the gods with the clay of earth. A metaphor, perhaps, for consciousness descending into matter. In the Egyptian texts, the first humans were tears of Ra, light condensed into form. The Hindu Vedas echo the same. The one became the many. In every telling, existence itself is vibration slowed until it becomes visible. The universe did not begin with creation. It began with sound. That sound still lingers, faint but constant, the Aum, the hidden note beneath all existence. Physicists call it the cosmic background radiation, the echo of the first explosion. Mystics hear it in meditation as a hum behind silence. When the two descriptions overlap, myth and science converge. Perhaps the ancients were not telling stories, but describing experience. They knew that to hear the universe, one must become still enough to resonate with it. And perhaps that is what their temples taught. Each was an instrument for tuning the body and soul to the frequency of the cosmos. The Great Pyramid's angles correspond to the speed of light. The Mayan temples at Palenque mirror the Fibonacci sequence of living growth. The megaliths of Europe align with lunar cycles. These were not coincidences. They were harmonies, the architecture of remembrance. Yet somewhere along the way, the song faltered. as humanity turned its gaze outward, toward conquest, technology, material power. The inner harmony dimmed. The temples grew silent, their resonance forgotten. The grid weakened, the balance between consciousness and nature fractured. In that dissonance, the myth of separation was born, the idea that humanity stood apart from the earth, that the divine was distant, unreachable. Every empire that rose upon that illusion eventually fell. History repeated the rhythm of forgetting, but perhaps forgetting was necessary. For in silence, one learns to listen again. The world we know, our cities of glass and electricity, our digital networks, may be the modern echo of the old grid. The same geometry returns, now built in circuits instead of stone. Data flows where energy once did. Satellites trace the same paths as the old constellations. The Earth's magnetic field hums beneath the grid of human technology. We have replicated the ancient design without remembering it. It is as if memory itself is guiding evolution from behind the veil, ensuring that the old patterns resurface until they are understood. And now, a strange convergence unfolds. Science begins to rediscover the truths once preserved in temples. Quantum physicists describe the universe as entangled energy. Biologists find that DNA emits photons, tiny bursts of light that communicate between cells. Neuroscientists map the brain and find networks that mirror cosmic webs of galaxies. The pattern repeats everywhere, from the smallest particle to the largest star. The ancients were right. The macrocosm and microcosm are one. The phrase, as above, so below, is not metaphor, it is physics. If this is the dawn of a new remembering, then perhaps the purpose of all ancient mystery was to prepare us for it. Every myth, every ruin, every prophecy points toward the same return, the moment when consciousness remembers its own origin, when the wall between human and divine dissolves, when the vibration becomes whole again. Some say this awakening will come as light, a surge of solar energy that will realign Earth's electromagnetic field, and with it, the human mind. Others believe it will be quieter, like a collective sigh, an inward turning that changes perception without apocalypse. However it unfolds, the old cycles suggest one certainty: transformation never arrives from outside, it rises from within. In the temples of Karnak, an inscription reads, "The body is the temple of the world." The ancients knew that every cell mirrors the cosmos. The geometry of the pyramids lives in our bones. The golden ratio spirals in our DNA. The stars we gaze upon are the same atoms we carry within. We have never been apart from the universe. We have only forgotten to listen to its rhythm inside us. Perhaps the great secret hidden beneath all myths is not where we came from, but what we are becoming. Humanity is not the end of creation, but its instrument, the means through which the universe learns to know itself. The ancient builders knew this, which is why they built not for the gods, but for resonance. They carved the frequency of eternity into stone, hoping one day, when the earth was ready, we would remember the song and continue it. And now, as solar winds intensify, as magnetic storms flicker across the sky, as the hum of the planet grows louder, perhaps that moment draws near. The air feels charged, the light sharper, the nights heavier with presence. It is as if the world itself is tuning, string by string, tone by tone, preparing for a return to harmony. When it comes, it will not be a cataclysm, but a remembering. Not an end, but an overtone, the next verse of the same cosmic melody. The temples will remain silent, but the vibration will move through us instead. Humanity will become the instrument of Earth's awakening, each heart a chamber, each thought a note. And when the resonance stabilizes, when the hum becomes clear, perhaps we will understand at last what the ancients meant when they said, "We are the children of the stars." For the stars are not distant. They are the memory of what we have always been. The forgotten will no longer be forgotten. The circle will close. The universe will hear its own echo through us. And in that moment, the silence will sing. At the edge of dawn, when the light is neither night nor day, the world feels weightless, suspended between memory and possibility. It is the hour when shadows are soft, when every sound seems older than itself. If one stands in silence, then, truly still, one might sense the faint pulse beneath the air, the heartbeat of the earth, steady and immense. It is a rhythm we once knew by instinct, before history, before language. And perhaps it is that rhythm, ancient and unbroken, that humanity is beginning to remember again. All stories, no matter how vast, return to this, the memory of wholeness. The ancients called it the great year, the turning of the cosmic wheel. To them, time was not a river but a circle, and we have reached its cusp once more. Every prophecy, every legend, every coded fragment of scripture has pointed to this era, not as an apocalypse, but as an unveiling. The Mayan calendars, the Vedic yugas, the Hopi tablets, the Hermetic texts, all speak of the same transition, the end of the age of sleep, the rebirth of light through remembrance. The signs are subtle, but everywhere. Frequencies rise. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's own tone, has been recorded pulsing higher than at any time in modern measurement. People speak of hearing it in their dreams, of waking to an untraceable hum that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Solar storms intensify. The sky burns with auroras at latitudes where none should exist. Magnetic fields shimmer. The poles drift faster. These are not omens of destruction, but the tuning of an instrument long neglected. The planet, like an ancient lyre, is tightening its strings. And as she tunes, so must we. In this awakening, science and spirit finally meet. What the mystics called ascension, physicists now describe as resonance shift. The human body, the earth, and the sun are part of one electromagnetic symphony. Each cell, each thought, each heartbeat contributes to a field that shapes reality itself. When that field rises in coherence, consciousness expands. This is not poetry, it is physics. But it is also prophecy. For the ancients always knew that what we call the divine was never elsewhere. It was the vibration of awareness moving through form. To awaken was simply to align with that pulse again. The memory of it never left completely. It flickered in sacred geometry, in mantra, in the quiet hum of the temples. It survived in art and mathematics, in the spiral of a shell, the orbit of planets, the curve of galaxies. Even our music, with its scales and harmonics, is a vestige of that cosmic structure. Every note, every interval, mirrors the proportions of creation. Humanity has been singing the shape of the universe without realizing it. Perhaps that is why certain sounds can make us weep, why the simplest chord can open the heart. Somewhere deep inside, we recognize the original tone. It is said that at the dawn of every new age, the veil between worlds thins. The dead speak in dreams, and forgotten knowledge returns through intuition. The flood of synchronicities, the sense of being guided, the collective feeling that something vast is approaching. These are not delusions. They are the resonance of awakening. The old network, the planetary consciousness that once bound heaven and earth, is stirring again. We feel it as restlessness, as longing, as the ache of memory. But remembrance is not without cost. To awaken is to shed illusion, and illusion is comfortable. The world resists change because it fears silence. We drown ourselves in noise, in distraction, in endless light that hides the stars. Yet even through the static, the signal persists. The same dream repeats across cultures, of returning home, of light descending, of a golden age reborn. Perhaps these are not fantasies, but transmissions, encoded messages from a future that remembers the past. If the ancients truly foresaw this time, they understood it as both an ending and a birth. Their myths of resurrection, Osiris rising from dismemberment, Christ emerging from the tomb, Quetzalcoatl returning on a feathered wind, were not about individuals, but humanity itself. Each story is the same pattern: descent, forgetting, awakening, renewal. The cycle turns, and the world begins again. Our ancestors built monuments to mark this turning. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Chichen Itza, all aligned to solstices and equinoxes, to the moment the sun was reborn. Those alignments were not superstition. They were reminders of rhythm. Every time the light returned, they celebrated not astronomy, but consciousness. The re-emergence of clarity from darkness. We, too, are standing at such a threshold. The old systems crumble, the economic, the political, the ideological, not because of failure, but because they belong to a frequency the earth no longer sustains. New patterns are forming, quieter, organic, born of cooperation rather than control. They are the faint outlines of the next world, drawn in vibration before form. To some, this change feels like collapse. To others, like calling. Both are true. For what is destruction but creation in disguise? The forest burns to make way for new growth. The flood clears the field for new seed. The old stories end only to make room for remembering. Humanity stands again where it has stood countless times before, at the brink of forgetting or awakening. The choice has always been the same. Perhaps that is why the ancients buried their wisdom in stone. They knew memory would fade, that words would be twisted and rewritten, but vibration endures. Geometry endures. The pyramid, the circle, the spiral. These are languages the universe cannot forget. They speak through structure, through proportion, through resonance. They remind us that the divine does not shout. It hums. The truth of our origin is not written in scripture or stars. It is written in the intervals between heartbeats. There are those who believe that the next great temple will not be built of stone at all, but of consciousness. A collective structure rising not from sand, but from coherence. Millions of minds resonating as one, like a new kind of symphony. Each thought a stone, each act of compassion a pillar. In such a world, the old gods will not return because they were never gone. They were waiting inside us all along, waiting for the vibration of humanity to reach the frequency of memory. Already, glimpses of this new world appear. The young speak in the language of energy, light, and vibration without ever having studied it. Artists paint mandalas before learning of sacred geometry. Scientists use quantum theory to describe what mystics once called spirit. The boundaries between disciplines, like those between dimensions, dissolve. It is as if the same intelligence that once moved the stars is moving through us again, composing a new form of understanding, one that feels ancient yet unborn. And yet, amid this awakening, the question remains, will we remember fully, or will we fall once more into the illusion of separation? The answer depends on our willingness to listen, to become quiet enough to hear the hum that never stopped. For the earth is still singing. Her oceans, her winds, her forests, all vibrate with the same pattern that once guided the builders of stone. She waits for us to join her again, not as masters, but as participants in the same music. When that harmony is restored, when humanity resonates once more with the planet's tone, the world will change, not through war or invention, but through frequency. The ancients called this the return of the song. It was not prophecy, but memory, a rhythm that echoes across ages, waiting for each civilization to find its way back to the melody. Perhaps this is what they meant by immortality, not the endless survival of the body, but the eternal return of awareness. We do not endure as flesh or name, but as vibration. Every thought, every act of love, every fragment of wisdom joins the universal field, humming quietly long after form dissolves. In that sense, nothing is ever lost. Every age, every fall, every forgotten world still sings beneath the surface of now. And so, as the cycle turns once more, the invitation remains the same as it was in the beginning. Remember. Remember that you are not apart from the stars, but made of them. Remember that light is not something that comes from without, but from within. Remember that the end of the story is always the same as its beginning, silence becoming sound. When the final veil lifts, when the last echoes of fear fall away, there will be no revelation, only recognition. Humanity will look into the mirror of the cosmos and see itself, not as accident, but as author. The gods we once worshipped were never beyond us. They were our own reflection, waiting for us to awaken to our magnitude. And when that happens, when the hum becomes a chord, when memory becomes harmony, the universe will sigh in relief, as if completing a long-forgotten song. The earth will exhale, and the light will settle softly across her surface like dawn upon ancient stone. The lost will no longer be lost. The forgotten will no longer ache to be found. There will only be stillness, luminous, infinite, and familiar. And somewhere in that stillness, just before sound begins again, a voice as old as creation will whisper the same truth it has whispered since the first sunrise. We never began, and we will never end. We are the echo and the origin, the silence and the song.